You know what steals more dreams, more energy, and more peace than failure ever could? The need to control what other people think, do, or say. We spend our lives trying to get people to see our worth, to understand our heart, to treat us the way we treat them. And every time they don't, every time they disappoint us, ghost us, betray us, or misunderstand us, we give them a little piece of our peace, a little piece of our power, and we call it love or loyalty or caring. But let's be honest, most of the time it's control dressed up as concern. And that's where the let them theory comes in. It's simple, but it's revolutionary. If they want to walk away, let them. If they want to talk about you, let them. If they don't see your value, let them. If they don't show up for you the way you show up for them, let them. Because every time you let them, you're not losing, you're freeing yourself. See, the world will try to convince you that peace comes from everything going right. But the truth is, peace comes from you deciding what's no longer worth fighting for. When you let them, you're saying, I don't need your approval to feel worthy. I don't need your attention to feel seen. I don't need your validation to stand tall. That's not indifference. That's mastery. That's emotional intelligence. That's you reclaiming your power. I want you to think about this. How much of your energy, your creativity, your focus has been spent trying to make people happy who don't even appreciate it? How much time have you wasted trying to convince people that you're not who their insecurities say you are? What would happen if you took that energy back and invested it in your growth, in your healing, in your mission? You'd be unstoppable. Because the truth is, when you stop chasing, you start attracting. When you stop forcing, you start flowing. And when you stop controlling, you start creating. The let them theory isn't about giving up on people. It's about giving up the illusion that you can make them be who they're not ready to be. Let them go through their journey. Let them learn their lessons. Let them drift if they need to. Because while they're busy playing small, you'll be busy becoming limitless. Now listen, letting go doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you stop carrying what isn't yours to carry. You can't save everyone. You can't fix people who don't want to heal. You can't make people respect you by explaining your worth over and over again. Let them misunderstand you. Let them misjudge you. Let them talk. Because the ones who matter, they'll see the truth in time. And by then, you'll be so far ahead, so grounded in peace, that you won't even need to say, I told you so. Your growth will say it for you. Here's what I want you to remember every time you choose peace over proving, every time you choose silence over drama, every time you choose detachment over desperation. You are taking your power back. You are stepping into your highest self. And that version of you, the one who knows their value, protects their energy, and walks away from chaos. That's the real powerhouse. That's the one who doesn't chase peace because they are peace. So the next time someone disappoints you, betrays you, or doesn't meet your expectations, just smile and say, let them. Let them be who they are. And you be who you were meant to be, unshakable, unstoppable, unbothered, and free. Because peace isn't found in control. It's found in letting go. That's how you take back your power. That's how you take back your life. Peace begins where control ends. The moment you stop forcing people to act right, you start feeling right. Most people spend their entire lives trying to get others to behave in ways that make them feel comfortable, validated, or secure. We get upset when someone doesn't text us back. We feel disrespected when someone doesn't recognize our effort. We take it personally when someone's words don't match our expectations. But what if peace was never about getting others to do what we want? What if peace is about releasing the illusion that we can? The truth is, every time you try to control the actions of others, you hand them the remote control to your emotions. You make your happiness conditional on their behavior. You say, I'll feel good when they act right, instead of, I'll feel good because I choose to. So control is a heavy burden, a constant battle with reality. The more you try to shape other people's choices, the more frustrated you become when they refuse to fit your vision. But peace begins when you realize you were never meant to carry that responsibility. You can guide, inspire, and influence, but you cannot control. The need to control comes from fear of being hurt, abandoned, misunderstood, or rejected. We think if we can control outcomes, we can prevent pain. But the paradox is, the more we try to control, the more pain we create. Because we begin to fight life instead of flow with it. When you release control, you open yourself to freedom. You stop expecting others to fill your emotional gaps. You stop taking every reaction as a reflection of your worth. You stop depending on apologies, validations, or approvals to feel peaceful. You begin to take responsibility for your own energy. You understand that peace is not something others can give you. It's something you cultivate by deciding what deserves your attention and what doesn't. People will disappoint you, misunderstand you, talk about you, or leave you. And that's okay. You can let them, because peace doesn't depend on their loyalty. It depends on your clarity. When you stop forcing people to act right, you allow them to reveal who they truly are. You stop managing their behavior and start observing it. You start noticing patterns, not to judge, but to understand. You learn to detach from needing things to go a certain way. You start saying, that's who they are right now, and that's okay. When you reach that level of acceptance, you experience an unshakable calm. You no longer react out of anger or disappointment. You respond out of understanding. Control is rooted in scarcity. It's the belief that if you let go, you'll lose something essential: love, security, respect, or validation. But when you stop chasing, you realize that what's meant for you cannot be taken, and what's not meant for you cannot be forced. The people who truly align with your spirit will stay, not because you controlled them, but because they feel peace in your presence. The right connections don't need manipulation. They thrive in authenticity. Think about how much energy you waste trying to manage things beyond your control, replaying conversations, predicting outcomes, worrying about how someone perceives you. That's all energy leaking out of your peace reservoir. When you stop forcing, you redirect that energy toward growth, creativity, healing, and purpose. You start focusing on what you can control: your mindset, your reactions, your vibration. You become more aware of what you allow into your space. You realize that boundaries are not walls, they are filters for peace. When you live from that space, people notice something different about you. You don't chase closure, you create it. You don't argue to be understood, you understand yourself. You don't need to prove your worth, you live it. And that changes everything. You begin to attract people who match your energy rather than drain it. You draw in situations that reflect your inner calm instead of your inner chaos. Life begins to flow, not because the world changes, but because your relationship with it does. Letting go of control doesn't mean apathy or indifference. It means trusting that everything unfolds the way it's meant to. It means learning the difference between influence and interference. You can still care deeply, still love fiercely, still show up fully, but without attachment to outcomes. You understand that you're responsible for your intentions, not for how others receive them. You offer your best self, and that's enough. When you stop forcing people to act right, you stop trying to make them fit into your version of peace. You stop expecting someone else to be the key to your calm. You recognize that peace comes from alignment. When your heart, mind, and actions move in harmony, you stop reacting to what's outside and start tuning into what's within. You realize you can walk away from chaos without bitterness. You can forgive without reopening old wounds. You can let go without losing compassion. Peace begins where control ends, because control is resistance. And resistance keeps you in tension. The moment you surrender the need to make things perfect, you start experiencing the perfection that already exists. You start trusting the rhythm of life. You start realizing that every delay, every rejection, every misunderstanding is redirection towards something better. When you loosen your grip, the universe can finally take the wheel. The real power is in surrender, not in weakness, but in wisdom. Wisdom says, I can't control how they treat me, but I can control how I respond. Wisdom says, I won't beg for peace from people who thrive in chaos. Wisdom says, my energy is too valuable to waste on resistance. When you embody that wisdom, your world begins to shift. You start moving from reaction to intention, from anxiety to awareness, from fear to flow. The most powerful people aren't those who can control everything. They're the ones who can stay centered when everything is out of control. That's where your strength, that's where your peace begins. Because once you stop trying to make people act right, you finally start feeling right. Letting them go isn't losing them, it's reclaiming the energy you were wasting trying to keep them. We hold on so tightly to people, relationships, and situations because we think losing them means losing a part of ourselves. We tell ourselves we're fighting for love, loyalty, or connection, but deep down, we're often fighting against reality. We're afraid that if we let go, there will be nothing left, that the emptiness will swallow us whole. But that emptiness you fear is actually the space where peace begins to grow. The moment you let go, you stop living in resistance. You stop swimming upstream trying to hold together what was already drifting apart. You stop feeding energy into something that's no longer feeding you back. Letting go doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you care enough about yourself to stop clinging to what drains your spirit. You can't force someone to stay who's ready to leave, just like you can't keep holding on to an idea that no longer aligns with your truth. When you keep trying to make things work, you confuse effort with alignment. Not everything that requires effort is meant to be kept. Some connections exist to teach you not to last forever. Some relationships come to mirror your wounds, not to heal them for you. When you let them go, you give yourself permission to learn the lesson without carrying the burden. You release the need to constantly fix what was never yours to fix. You begin to understand that sometimes love means releasing, not holding tighter. The energy you spend trying to convince someone of your worth is the energy you could be using to build your peace. When you're busy chasing people, you forget who you are. You start molding yourself to fit their preferences, editing your truth to earn their approval, shrinking your light to make them comfortable. But every time you do that, you lose a little bit of yourself. You become disconnected from your own energy. Letting them go is the act of remembering who you are without the weight of proving it. It's saying, I will no longer trade my peace for company. I will no longer beg for reciprocity. It's realizing that closure doesn't come from their explanation. It comes from your decision to stop waiting for one. Letting go is an act of faith. Faith that what's meant for you will never need to be forced. Faith that endings are just disguised beginnings. Faith that there's something waiting for you on the other side of the release that you can't yet see. Most people never experience true freedom because they never let go completely. They cling to people who've already detached, to versions of themselves that no longer exist, to memories that no longer serve their evolution. But letting go is not abandonment, it's alignment. You're not losing them, you're losing the illusion that you needed them to be whole. When you let them go, you reclaim your emotional energy, you reclaim your focus, your creativity, your clarity. The space that was once filled with anxiety becomes space for peace. The conversations you used to replay in your mind fade away, and in their place, you start hearing your own inner voice again. That's the moment you realize how heavy it all was, how much you were carrying just to keep something alive that was already fading. The peace you feel afterward isn't from gaining something new, it's from releasing what wasn't meant to stay. There's a kind of strength in walking away quietly, not out of pride, but out of self-respect. You stop explaining your worth to people who refuse to see it. You stop begging for consistency from those who thrive in confusion. You stop fighting battles that keep you emotionally bankrupt. And you do it not because you stopped caring, but because you finally started caring about yourself. That's what letting go really is. Self-care at the deepest level. It's saying, I choose myself. I choose peace. I choose to protect my energy. That when you stop trying to keep people who aren't meant to stay, you start realizing how much power you had all along. You begin to attract different experiences because your energy shifts. You start seeing that peace isn't something you find in someone else. It's something you become when you stop fighting for what's not yours. The universe has a way of rewarding release. The moment you stop forcing, something new begins to flow toward you. The opportunities, people, and blessings that align with your growth begin to appear effortlessly, not because they were never there, but because now you're open enough to receive them. Letting go also means forgiving, not necessarily reconciling, but freeing yourself from resentment. When you hold on to anger, you stay connected to what hurt you. You keep replaying the story, reliving the pain. Forgiveness cuts that cord. It's not about letting them off the hook. It's about releasing yourself from the hook. You forgive not because they deserve peace, but because you do. You forgive so you can move forward without dragging the past behind you like a shadow. You forgive because holding on is too heavy for the soul. You can love someone and still let them go. Love doesn't always mean keeping. Sometimes love means wishing them well as you close the chapter. Sometimes love means loving yourself enough to step away. When you do that, you shift from attachment to appreciation. You stop needing the story to continue. You just become grateful that it happened. You start seeing that every person you had to let go of was a mirror, reflecting parts of you that needed healing, strength, and clarity, and every release brought you closer to yourself. Letting them go doesn't mean you won't miss them. It doesn't mean it won't hurt. It means you've decided to stop making pain your home. It means you've accepted that peace can't coexist with constant resistance. You stop clinging to what could have been and make space for what can be. You start living in the present instead of rehearsing the past. You start creating instead of controlling. And that's how you reclaim your energy, by no longer giving it to people or situations that drain it. There's a quiet confidence that comes after you've truly let go. You no longer react to things that once triggered you. You no longer chase closure or explanation. You stop explaining your boundaries because you live them. You stop being available for chaos because you've learned the value of calm. You don't seek revenge because peace has become your form of justice. You realize that you don't have to fight for what's aligned, and you don't have to fear what's gone. You understand that everything that leaves creates room for something better to arrive. Letting them go isn't losing them. It's losing the version of yourself that believed you needed to hold on. It's stepping into your next chapter with strength, grace, and groundedness. It's the beginning of a new kind of freedom, the kind that comes when your heart no longer depends on someone else's staying, but on your own decision to stay at peace. You don't owe anyone an explanation for protecting your peace. Silence is sometimes your strongest boundary. In a world that constantly demands responses, justification, and validation, choosing silence can feel uncomfortable. We live in a culture where everyone feels entitled to your story, your energy, your reactions. People want to know why you didn't reply, why you walked away, why you changed. But peace doesn't require explanation, and healing doesn't need permission. There comes a point in life where you realize that not everyone deserves access to your truth, your time, or your emotions. Silence isn't weakness, it's wisdom. It's knowing when speaking only feeds chaos and when quiet protects your energy. When you protect your peace, you are making a powerful declaration that your mental, emotional, and spiritual well-being matter more than being understood. There will always be people who twist your silence into arrogance, your distance into bitterness, your boundaries into disrespect. But that's not your problem to fix. You don't owe anyone clarity who only listens to argue, not to understand. You don't need to justify your decisions to those who weren't there for your struggles. Silence is not avoidance, it's self-respect. It's refusing to argue your value with people who have already decided to misunderstand it. The truth is, when you start protecting your peace, it will offend people who benefited from your lack of boundaries. They'll call you cold because you no longer overextend. They'll call you distant because you no longer chase. They'll call you selfish because you finally said no. But protecting your peace is not selfish, it's sacred. It's saying, I will no longer bleed energy into spaces that don't pour back into me. You reach a point where you realize you don't have to attend every argument you're invited to. You don't have to fix every misunderstanding. You don't have to prove your good heart. Peace doesn't come from winning every battle. It comes from walking away from unnecessary ones. There's power in silence because it disarms chaos. When you stop reacting, you take away the fuel that feeds negativity. The person who can remain calm in conflict holds the true power. It's easy to react, to shout back, to defend yourself. But real strength is restraint. It's breathing deeply when provoked. It's choosing inner stillness over outer noise. It's realizing that every reaction costs you energy, and not everyone deserves that investment. When you stay silent, you stay in control of your energy. You stay connected to your center. You stop letting the outside world dictate your inner world. People often misunderstand silence. They think it means you don't care, but it often means you care deeply, just not enough to lose your peace over it. Silence doesn't mean indifference. It means discernment. You're not ignoring what happened. You're choosing not to feed it. You understand that sometimes words don't heal. They escalate. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can say is nothing at all, because silence has its own language. It communicates clarity, strength, and boundaries in ways words never can. Protecting your peace also means being selective with access. You start realizing not everyone deserves a front row seat to your life. You stop explaining yourself to people who don't value your perspective. You stop allowing negativity to live rent free in your mind. You choose stillness over arguments, distance over drama, solitude over noise. You stop defending your peace because it's not up for debate. You begin to understand that peace is not found in other people's approval. It's found in the quiet spaces where you no longer need to explain your truth. There will be moments when silence feels lonely, especially when you're used to over-explaining or over-giving. You'll want to defend yourself to make them understand. But peace requires you to let go of that need. You can't control what people think about you. You can't make them see your intentions. The ones who truly know you won't need an explanation, and the ones who refuse to see you clearly won't believe one anyway. Silence teaches you that not every connection is meant to be maintained, not every conversation is worth continuing, not every misunderstanding is worth correcting. Sometimes walking away quietly is the loudest truth you can speak. As you grow, your tolerance for chaos decreases. You stop explaining your boundaries because you realize those who respect you won't need an explanation, and those who don't will never accept one. You learn that no is a complete sentence. You learn that peace is more valuable than being right. You learn that you can love someone deeply and still not engage in every discussion. Silence becomes a tool of emotional maturity. You realize that validation is temporary, but peace is permanent. There's a deep serenity that comes from no longer defending your choices. You stop posting your peace for public approval. You stop oversharing your healing journey to be understood. You stop proving your growth. You simply live it. Your actions start speaking for you. The people who once demanded explanations begin to see that your silence is not emptiness, it's evolution. They notice that you no longer respond the way you used to. You've stopped matching energies. You've started mastering yours. And that's what protecting peace looks like in its purest form. Choosing silence also requires trust. Trust that the truth will reveal itself without your effort, that what's meant to stay will stay without chasing, that the right people will understand even without explanation. You stop forcing alignment. You stop trying to control perception. You begin to understand that everything misunderstood about you is simply an opportunity for others to show their own character. You don't need to fix their narrative. You just need to stay grounded in your own. Peace becomes your standard, not your prize. You start filtering conversations through a simple question: does this protect my peace or disturb it? And if it disturbs it, you choose silence. You realize that your energy is currency and not everyone deserves a transaction. Silence becomes your filter, your shield, your power. It's the pause before reaction, the space where clarity lives, the breath that prevents regret. It's not avoidance, it's awareness. It's understanding that you're no longer available for what drains you. When you begin to honor silence, you stop rushing to fill every space. You learn that not every moment needs words, not every situation needs closure, and not every loss needs explanation. You start to value stillness over stimulation, calm over chaos, solitude over validation. You start hearing your intuition again because it finally has room to speak. Protecting your peace isn't about building walls. It's about creating space for alignment. It's about saying, I choose calm even if they don't understand it. You don't owe anyone an explanation for that choice. You don't owe them justification for your distance, your quiet, or your boundaries. The people who value your peace will never demand that you sacrifice it for their comfort. And the people who do will naturally drift away. That's how silence works. It filters what's meant to stay from what's meant to go. In the end, silence becomes your sanctuary, the space where your energy resets and your spirit realigns, the space where you no longer explain. You simply exist in peace. When you stop chasing approval, you make space for alignment. The right people will meet you where you are. The constant need for approval is one of the deepest forms of emotional bondage. It keeps you trapped in a cycle of performing, pleasing, and pretending, always trying to be enough for someone who hasn't even decided what they want. From childhood, we're conditioned to seek permission before we act, validation before we believe, applause before we rest. We measure our worth by reactions, by the likes, by the praise, by the recognition. But the truth is, as long as you're chasing approval, you're running away from authenticity. You can't be aligned when you're constantly bending, editing, or dimming yourself to be accepted. Alignment begins the moment you stop chasing and start standing in your truth. Approval addiction is subtle. It disguises itself as kindness, humility, or adaptability. You tell yourself you're being considerate, that you're being a team player, that you're doing what's right. But underneath it, there's often a fear, the fear of being rejected, misunderstood, or left out. You start shaping your identity around what others expect rather than who you truly are. You agree when you want to say no. You smile when you want to cry. You shrink when you should expand. And every time you betray your truth for approval, you drift further away from your alignment. You lose your own rhythm trying to match someone else's song. When you stop chasing approval, you start reclaiming your power. You begin to realize that peace doesn't come from people liking you. It comes from you liking yourself. You stop asking, do they approve of me? And start asking, does this align with who I really am? That shift changes everything. It changes how you show up, who you attract, and how you make decisions. You stop seeking validation in all the wrong places. You stop performing for people who only notice your mistakes. You stop explaining yourself to people who aren't even listening. You stop over-giving to prove your worth. You start valuing your energy enough to reserve it for people who genuinely see you. When you no longer need to be approved of, you start to breathe differently. There's a calmness that takes over when you stop worrying about how you're perceived. You no longer walk into rooms hoping to fit in. You walk in knowing you belong. You no longer chase connections, you attract them. Because authenticity has a frequency. It calls in what's aligned and filters out what's not. The people who are meant for you will find you, not because you're perfect, but because you're real. The ones who only loved your mask will fall away when you take it off, and that's a blessing, not a loss. When you live for approval, you're living on borrowed energy. You depend on the outside world to charge your self-worth. So it fluctuates with every opinion. One compliment lifts you, one criticism breaks you. That's not stability, that's survival. Alignment, on the other hand, is internal stability. It's knowing that your worth is constant. Whether you're praised or ignored, it's trusting yourself even when no one claps. It's being okay with disappointing others if it means being true to yourself. Because sometimes choosing alignment means letting go of people who only like the version of you that served their comfort. The more you align with your truth, the more you outgrow environments that thrive on approval. You start noticing how often you used to over-explain, over-compromise, or overextend. You realize how much peace you traded for acceptance. You start saying no without guilt. You start speaking your truth without fear. You start setting boundaries not to push people away, but to keep your energy sacred. And what's beautiful is that once you do this, life begins to align itself around your authenticity. The right people begin to appear, people who resonate with your frequency, not your performance. People who love your honesty, not your perfection. Chasing approval is exhausting because it's endless. The goalpost always moves. You get one person's approval, then you crave another's. You meet one standard, then a new one appears. It never ends because it's not rooted in truth. But alignment is freedom. It doesn't need to prove anything. It just is. When you're aligned, you no longer need everyone to like you because you like you. You no longer feel the pressure to explain your choices because you know your intentions. You no longer seek permission to rest, to heal, to grow, to shine. You just do it because it feels right. You begin to notice that the relationships that remain when you stop performing are the ones built on truth. They're quieter but deeper. They don't require masks. They don't demand constant proving. They don't collapse under honesty. These are the relationships that bring you peace, not pressure. These are the people who meet you where you are because they see your soul, not your image. And that's what alignment does. It creates space for authenticity to breathe. It filters your circle, sharpens your focus, and brings you into harmony with your purpose. When you stop chasing approval, your creativity expands. You no longer censor your expression out of fear of judgment. You no longer create to be accepted. You create to express. You stop worrying about who will like it, and you start trusting that the right ones will feel it. That's when your work becomes powerful, your voice becomes magnetic, and your presence becomes felt. You're no longer creating for applause. You're creating from alignment. And that energy can be felt without words. There's something liberating about waking up one day and realizing that you don't need to prove anything anymore. You don't need to justify your decisions, your healing, or your boundaries. You don't need to over-explain why you chose peace, why you changed directions, or why you stopped showing up where you no longer feel respected. You realize that the right people will never need to be convinced, and the wrong ones will never be satisfied. That realization frees you from the endless loop of trying to be understood by those who refuse to see you. Alignment is not about being liked, it's about being true. It's about standing firm in your values even when it costs you popularity. It's about trusting your path even when no one else understands it. It's about knowing that rejection is redirection, that criticism is feedback, and that silence is sometimes validation. When you're aligned, you start attracting peace instead of approval, purpose instead of attention, depth instead of drama. You stop seeking to be impressive and start aiming to be authentic. The moment you stop chasing approval, everything that's meant for you starts flowing toward you. The right people don't need to be convinced. They just recognize your frequency. They meet you where you are, not where you pretend to be. They honor your boundaries, respect your truth, and grow alongside you. That's the beauty of alignment. It doesn't require performance. It rewards presence. When you stand in who you are unapologetically, the world rearranges itself to meet you there. Mastery is not about reacting to every situation. It's about remaining centered no matter what happens around you. Most people spend their lives trapped in reaction mode, constantly responding to circumstances, to emotions, to people's opinions, to the chaos around them. Life throws something unexpected, and immediately we tense up, defend, attack, or collapse. We let the external world dictate our internal state. But true mastery begins when you decide that your peace is no longer negotiable, that your energy is no longer at the mercy of events or people. You stop being a product of your environment and start becoming the creator of it. Mastery is the ability to remain grounded when everything around you is shaking. When you learn to stay centered, you stop taking everything personally. You begin to see that most of what people do has nothing to do with you. Their reactions, their moods, their behavior. It's all a reflection of their internal world. When you understand that you no longer waste energy trying to control it, you stop matching their chaos with chaos. You respond with calm. You start to notice the space between stimulus and response, that sacred pause where your power lies. In that pause, you decide whether to react out of emotion or respond out of awareness. And the more you choose awareness, the stronger you become. Mastery doesn't mean you never feel anger, sadness, or frustration. It means those emotions no longer control your actions. You can observe them without being consumed by them. You can feel deeply but remain steady. That's the difference between reacting and responding. A reaction is automatic, it's survival. A response is intentional, it's strength. When you master your emotions, you stop giving temporary feelings the power to create permanent damage. You stop burning bridges because of momentary storms. You learn that calmness is not passive, it's a decision to protect your energy. Remaining centered doesn't happen by accident. It's a discipline. It's choosing not to let your mind run wild when things don't go as planned. It's grounding yourself in gratitude when life tests you. It's returning to your breath when chaos tries to pull you in. You learn to anchor yourself in values, not circumstances. Your peace stops depending on how others behave. Your mood stops depending on outcomes. You stop allowing outside noise to interrupt your inner stillness. You realize that stability isn't something you find, it's something you build from within. When you reach that level of mastery, you start noticing how different the world feels. The same situations that used to trigger you no longer have the same power. The same words that once hurt you now bounce off your calm. You stop getting caught in emotional traps. You stop reacting to gossip, to criticism, to negativity. Not because you don't care, but because you've outgrown the need to prove yourself through reaction. You start valuing peace more than being right, clarity more than control, freedom more than validation. Mastery is the art of holding your center when life tests your limits. It's not about escaping challenges, it's about walking through them with presence. You stop wishing for an easy life and start building inner strength for a meaningful one. You stop seeing problems as punishment and start seeing them as training. Every test becomes a mirror, showing you where you still lose. Balance. Every difficulty becomes an invitation to deepen your peace. You realize that calm is not the absence of storms, it's learning to remain still in the middle of them. People will try to provoke you. Life will throw distractions. Circumstances will challenge your patience. But every time you stay calm, you reclaim power. Every time you choose silence over reaction, you rise above the noise. Every time you stay centered when everything around you screams for chaos, you strengthen your spirit. That's what mastery looks like. Quiet power. It's not loud, not dramatic, not flashy. It's the kind of strength that doesn't need to announce itself because it can be felt. The moment you stop reacting to everything, you start controlling what you can actually influence, your energy. You realize that your peace is your responsibility. No one can take it unless you hand it over. When someone tries to trigger you and you don't respond, they lose power. When life gets unpredictable and you remain grounded, you become unstoppable. You stop feeding your energy to things that don't deserve it. You stop explaining yourself to people committed to misunderstanding you. You start living from the inside out instead of the outside in. The centered person doesn't chase calm, they become it. They carry stillness into every room they walk into. Their energy shifts environments without saying a word. People feel their presence because it's anchored. When you operate from that space, you stop competing with chaos. You stop being reactive to other people's storms. You stop allowing your peace to depend on the behavior of the world. You become the steady flame that doesn't flicker no matter how strong the wind blows. Mastery also means learning to let go of what you can't control. You stop trying to fix people who don't want to change. You stop fighting battles that don't belong to you. You stop replaying conversations in your mind that serve no purpose. You start focusing on what's real, what's now, what's within. You start simplifying your life, decluttering your energy, protecting your mental space. You understand that peace is not found in the absence of problems, but in your ability to face them without losing yourself. When you remain centered, people may mistake it for indifference. They might say you've changed or that you don't care. But in truth, you've simply elevated. You no longer need to prove your emotions through reaction. You've learned that calm is a superpower. You've learned that silence often says more than words ever could. You've learned that responding from awareness is far more effective than reacting from ego. And that shift changes every part of your life. Your relationships, your decisions, your direction. Being centered doesn't mean nothing affects you. It means you process everything through peace. You acknowledge the pain, but don't become it. You recognize the chaos, but don't feed it. You feel the emotion, but don't let it drive your choices. You've built an inner sanctuary where you can retreat anytime. No matter what's happening around you, that's where your strength lies. That's where clarity is born. That's where you find the power to keep showing up without burning out. When you master this, your energy speaks before you do. You walk differently, you speak differently, you think differently, you radiate presence instead of pressure. You start attracting calm situations because your energy no longer matches chaos. You make decisions not out of fear, but from alignment. You stop reacting to every storm because you've become the sky, vast, steady, and unbothered by passing weather. You stop trying to control what's happening and start mastering how you move through it. That's when you truly begin to live with power, peace, and purpose intertwined in every breath.